It ought to concern every person because it is a debasement of our common humanity. It ought to concern every community because it tears at our social fabric. It ought to concern every business because it distorts markets. It ought to concern every nation because it endangers public health and fuels violence and organized crime. I'm talking about the injustice, the outrage of human trafficking, which must be called by its true name, modern slavery.
There are many stories of this horrific issue happening on American soil. For example, 4 Central American women agreed to pay $5,000, half up front, to be smuggled into the U.S. They were taken across the border into Texas, but the gang then demanded more money. When we didn't pay, the women were forced into lives of total servitude. By day, they worked as unpaid domestic servants. At night, they became the gang's sex slaves. All the while, their families were extorted for more money.
One would never want to receive the news that one of their loved ones has been kidnapped and could possibly be shipped off to another state or even worse, another country, especially with human trafficking becoming a more predominant issue in the United States. There are different types of human trafficking: sex trafficking and labor trafficking.
According to FBI statistics, about 8 in 10 of the suspected incidents of human trafficking were classified as sex trafficking, and about 1 in 10 were classified as labor trafficking. These types of numbers should concern the American public, but yet they and the U.S. government don't think it is a big deal.
The National Human Trafficking Resource Center estimates it is a $32 billion industry, with half coming from industrialized countries. According to the U.S. Department of Justice, human trafficking has become the second fastest growing criminal industry, just behind drug trafficking, with children accounting for roughly half of all victims.
In 1999, a teenage girl was taken from a Haitian orphanage and smuggled using phony documentation into Miami, where she was forced to work as a domestic servant for up to 15 hours a day, 7 days a week. She was never paid, not allowed to go to school, occasionally beaten, and subjected to other inhumane treatment. After suffering for nearly 6 years, she managed to escape in 2005.
This March, justice was finally served when 3 of her captors were convicted in the case. The sad thing about these kinds of things is that some of the victims truly feel helpless. April Bentley, who was a victim of human trafficking, said that you are really imprisoned and you can't do what you want to do. You do what you're told to do.
Shamir McKenzie, a survivor of sex trafficking at truck stops, had to endure the life of a lot lizard for 8 months. She has spoken to the United States Department of Transportation in Washington, D.C., and spoke of trafficking hotspots on different methods of transportation.
She recounts her experience working at truck stops and says that as she got in the truck, she would call her trafficker. Truck drivers heard these conversations and knew she had a pimp, but no one offered to help. Instead, they asked when she would be working again. Since her release from the trafficking life, she has become a passionate advocate for other women who endured the same conditions she did.
There is also labor trafficking that exploits men, women, and even children to become domestic servants for little or no pay. Jean-Claude Tovayev, a former University of Michigan janitor and part-time tennis instructor, has been federally charged with trying to pass off 4 African immigrants as his own children, giving them fake names and birth dates to sink them over in 2006.
Documents accuse him of abusing them for years and forcing them to do housework. His so-called children told authorities they were deprived of food and beaten with broom handles, a plunger, electrical cords, and an ice scraper when they didn't finish chores or housework.
The Department of Human and Health Services has established the Blue Campaign to help trafficking victims. Know that you have a voice and you have the power to use it. If you want to help save lives, you can contact the Department of Health and Human Services and ICE, also known as Immigration and Customs Enforcement, to find out what you can do to help save these victims and prevent any future trafficking from happening.